Ben Aziz, I remember you well. Your death now seems a convention of such an existence. Neither blade, nor tooth, nor your uncommitted claws could hold you to living. Speak then, my brother. Tell me, how does eternal contemplation torture a twisted soul?
Almost half a minute of talking, right? In one shot, with full-blown character animation. And it ain't easy, but hopefully that's explained to you the process of how to tackle something at a very high level in a professional standard, as we're building this pro archive of the Real Animator training library. So what we did is we set the scene by building a small stage, imagining what's happening. We had to know our character design and story and prior to doing all this, of course. Then we established a first pose, and then we taken that first pose and put it into a framing context of what we're thinking for the scene. Then we've covered this. We basically listened to the dialogue, listened and thought about the performance of the character, all the time keeping in mind the integrity of the character, who he is, what his motives are, what his intentions are, what his personality is, and how we're trying to bring that across with these thumbnail sketches. And I have then tested it out, and this is what I try to do. I try to get it working in its rawest form at this stage before we take it any further, right?
Ben Aziz, I remember you well. Your death now seems a convention of such an existence. Neither blade, nor tooth, nor your uncommitted claws could hold you to living. Speak then, my brother. Tell me, how does eternal contemplation torture a twisted soul?
If we really want to animate this and animate this well, the animator would be doing what I did now, all right? I already have all this, but somebody else would have done this and given these drawings in a much better state to the animator, right? So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to take this layout drawing here, and I'm going to make a new drawing called a layout. So let's talk about what we did. We did a drawing here and a kind of ideal framing that I wanted. So I tidied up. I created a layout drawing. Right, so then I went over into Photoshop and put on my background painting head. And I painted up this background. Let me talk a little bit about this background here that I painted up. We want to keep everything dark in the background and indeed dark in the foreground because of the mood lighting, and we want to have our focus very much on the foreground. We also played a bit with the lighting to bring the foreground out even more, so when we look at it like that now, if we take the lighting off suddenly, so we're doing, this is what we do for animation background. What we want to stand out, we need to stand out. We also have to think about color direction. So lots of blues, and what's going to pop against the blues is the orange of this guy in the foreground. We're going to talk about animation law, all right? The stuff that nobody else talks about when they animate, right? This is one of the 3 fundamental laws of animation. The first is timing, right? And we have kind of timed out these thumbnails in a way where we've timed out in accordance to the words that are being said. The other is slowing in and slowing out, okay? And the other, which is again what we're doing, but the one we're focusing on here is arcing, right? Arcing. Arcing, let's talk about, even at this early stage, what's going on here, right? The head is literally moving in a circle, right? It's literally doing this. Watch it. Comes up, right? Turns away, nodding to itself, all right? But let's look at the arc in its rawest form, without the little head nod that'll happen. The secondary arc, okay, the secondary action, another animation law. The head is simply going back around in a circle, right? What's happening to the hand? The hand is coming, arcing up. He's going to bring the skull up on ah. He's going to move it this way, right? Then he's going to basically bring it here. So it's going to be doing this kind of thing. Another kind of loop, right? It's going to bring it up and then bring it almost like a swinging pendulum, right? Almost like the pendulum will slow in at the top, right? Slow out. Then throw it down here like this, right? So these are the extreme poses that we have adapted from all of these thumbnails that we did. We have created a pose test with this.
Ben Aziz, I remember you well. Your death now seems a convention of such an existence. Neither blade, nor tooth, nor your uncommitted claws could hold you to living. Speak then, my brother. Tell me, how does eternal contemplation torture a twisted soul?
So there we can see how it is looking at this early stage. So building the frameworks. You'll remember that we, on our extreme poses, we gone and wrote the frame number, the frame count. 233, we want to hit this pose. 263, we want to hit that pose. So there's almost 30 frames exact between here and here, okay? Then we want to hit this pose, 291, okay? So there's around about another 30 frames. Sometimes it varies, okay? 381, so there's about 50 frames between here and here. So it varies, okay? So the next challenge for us is to start breaking down this animation, right? We want to, and that's what I've started doing here, and I've started very, very loosely. One of the things that causes great anguish and bad work in the young space today who are fiddling about with software, that haven't learned to animate on paper, that haven't really learned how to time properly, is they get excited when they see it all flowing, and they think flowing like this is great. But this is, if we look at the frame numbers up top as established, we got 25 to 57 to 77, almost 20 frame gaps in there, almost second gaps with these little moves, right? So you can imagine how, when we time that out with the dialogue, how it's going to look. This is extremely high level timing in the head that I'm talking about here, because I no longer think about it like, I don't draw this little chart and really think about my slow-ins, and I don't scrub with the dialogue and think, oh, how is that happening? I'm like, okay, what's the frame number? What's the time? How am I going to get from here? How many seconds is it, right? It's the easiest way to do it, and I've said this to my members all the time. How do I break a second up? Simple. We break that second up in half. That's 12 frames. We break it up in quarters. That's 6 frames. And anywhere between is 4 or 8, right? And then 4 or 8 between there, right? And then if you want to extend the 8 frame, it's nice to just think of 10 frame slow-ins, right? Just under. Why 10 frames and why not a 12 frame slow-in? Because sometimes if you slow in too much, you get an overly boiling line, you get a weird strobe if you got nowhere to go. So it's nice to hold a drawing for 4 frames, which is just under a quarter of a second, which is 6 frames, right? This here is a golden formula. A golden formula for managing time in your head. So, but now we've talked about squash and stretch in the face and how the rest of the face moves in relation to those mouth movements, those particular things. And we want them all to relate to each other, right? And even here, I've drawn them without them really relating, right? I haven't thought about them relating, but you can see that they still somehow relate, right? His eyes are a little bit crazy, is a little bit too much, but they all relate pretty good. So we've got this head nod with his closed eyes stretching. I remember you well, right? Now, I haven't hit every mouth shape. I've still got to do that, and I'm going to do that off screen in the way that I've showed you. But I've hit the mouth shapes on the frame count, which I need for the timing of the rest of the body. So each head nod. So here you can see if he's saying remember, you've got rim, I remem, and again the other So we've got the two mbr, you well, but this is obviously the we're squashing into that, settling in there. I anticipate the B mouth. I really squash all this together, right? Then we just have everything on a hold. The whole body is on a hold while he says Ben. A little bit of the tongue in between the teeth on death. Death. He doesn't really say it like that, but we want to sell that he's talking about the death, right? Your death. Neither blade, right? So before he opens his eyes, we get through this dialogue with a head turn. And as we can see, what I've done with this is I've got his head turning this way, but I've got his jaw leaning this way, right? So we have this effect, right? A bit of drag on his jaw, right? As he's kind of like shaking his head to himself. Now, as he says living, I'm having him looking up as if there's a higher power, right? So watch what happens with his eyes, right? Could hold you to living, right? So he's looking up. He's, as I said, he's not all there, right? So he's looking up and he's glancing. There's a slow glance above him, right? As if there's a higher power that they're both answering to, right? So he's looking to himself, could hold you to living. And to enrich it even more, right? We've got so much going on here that we kind of miss it when you watch it the first time and you think, well, why bother? Well, that's when you're passionate and you really try to put life into something, into a performance, right? So here, rather than talking about the mouth shape, right, I'd rather talk about this secondary action. So while he's looking, right, and now he's closed his eyes, but look, he's patting him lovingly on the head, right? When you watch it this time, I want you to really think about the aspects that I tried to bring to the character of him trying to have this persona of a noble king, a lord, but actually he's got this boiling, insane streak, this rage within him that he's trying to control with his breathing, and he's trying to, he's trying to treat this skull with respect, even though he's the actual reason that thing's a skull, right? He killed the guy, so...
Ben Aziz. I remember you well. Your death now seems a convention of such an existence. Neither blade, nor tooth, nor your uncommitted claws could hold you to living. Speak then, my brother. Tell me, how does eternal contemplation torture a twisted soul?
Almost half a minute of talking, right? In one shot. With full-blown character animation, and it ain't easy, but hopefully that's explained to you the process of how to tackle something at a very high level in a professional standard, as we're building this pro archive of the Real Animator training library.